Hey everyone. In today's Tales of the Mendicant Preachers, I'm sharing something from Hugh of St. Victor from this book, Angelic Spirituality. It's from his commentary on the celestial hierarchy of Dionysius, the Areopagite. Pretty cool. And this is concerning the distinction of mundane and divine theology and demonstrations of the distinctions. Jews seek signs while Greeks seek wisdom. Certainly there was a kind of wisdom that appears as wisdom to those who do not know true wisdom. And the world found this kind of knowledge and began to be puffed up, swelling with pomposity and imagining themselves great because of what they had found. Taking what they had found and having complete confidence in it as if that knowledge were an effective path, the ancient philosophers thought to proceed beyond these things to an even higher wisdom. And in fact, they did ascend. Indeed, they were even lifted up so that they reached the secret things of the heart. The Greek philosophers made themselves, as it were, a ladder, based upon the outward appearance of creatures, thereby climbing up to the invisible things of the Creator. Then, when those invisible things had been manifested to them by God, they moved forward into illumination. These invisible things did indeed become known, but they were made known through an impure heart. Yes, those invisible things that they saw were known, yet there were in fact other things that were not known to them. They thought by means of those invisible things that had been clearly manifested to them to enter into even those more secret things that are hidden. But in this manner, in the falsehood of their fictions, their minds failed to attain the highest possible truth, because what they apprehended on the basis of outward appearance is not, finally, the fullest truth to be found. Thus God made the wisdom of this world foolish, since the wisdom of God is not found in this world. God showed another wisdom which seemed to be foolishness, yet it was not. And what was this wisdom? Well, this wisdom was Christ crucified, of whom we preach so that truth might be sought through humility. But the world despised the healer and was thus unable to come to know this truth. Worldly philosophy certainly wished to contemplate the wondrous works that God had made, yet was not willing to venerate the works that God had put forth for imitation. Neither did the world attend to his death, but rather sought healing through pious devotion. It dedicated itself to false healing, presuming to investigate strange, unsuitable things through vain curiosity. Now, this philosophy seemed to be proficient with things outside itself, but deficient with regard to things within themselves, and totally unable to find any of those things that were beyond the self. And worldly philosophy put forth opinions concerning false healing that began with a heart filled with pride. They seemed to ignore the truth and eagerly followed a road of errors, pursuing many things opposed to the full truth. This philosophy aspired as well to many things contrary to the honor of divinity, many things that were a travesty to God's most eminent majesty, so that error came into being. Now, certainly at first there was truth in worldly philosophy, and it seemed great. Yet it fell into falsehood just at that moment when truth ought to have been consummated. This, for example, just as certain kinds of light are often described by means of their equal but opposite portion of dense darkness, so within worldly philosophy there grew a deep mist of ignorance, whereby a trap of errors was laid down in the deceitfulness of pride. Again, there is no doubt that these philosophers saw where the light was, yet they were not able to see the darkness. In not seeing the darkness, they were entrapped by deception on account of the audacity of their presumptions. Thus they fell headlong only into those things having been clearly manifested. Funny, because I talk about that a lot, where it's important not to speak of things that you have not yet seen. Only speak of that which you have seen and realize the limitation of that. That's what he's talking about here. Yet still, how great are those excellent and vast monuments that these philosophers left behind, whereby so many investigations into the secrets of nature and the hidden things of the world's foundation were carried forward, so that we might regard the efficacy of these same things, bringing them to light by means of every kind of study. We read the arts, the studia, the disciplines, and the many rules of reason that those philosophers had carefully examined and found by the gift of understanding itself and by their own natural mental abilities. Having discovered these things, they wrote of them, and in so doing handed down to posterity logic, ethics, mathematics, and physics, concerned with the forms of reason, life, and death. They wrote of these things and handed down the institution of natural decency, the disposition of order, the causes and the providence of all things. No, they were not weak in these areas. They apprehended the truth, but only a partial truth, to which they became servants, and this partial truth had to be served. It was not the truth that leads to life, and they were not the sons of life. This life is a gift for our account, which will be given in full at the consummation, will be made obedient as well to the beginning of things. The labor of this gift was appointed to them. Its fruit serves us. They perceived light by means of the whole of their understanding, by the incisive nature of their genius, and by the virtuous sensibility of their example. Through these things, they subtly discussed the power of creatures and the means and ways of inferior natures according to the forms of innate reason. Lastly, they were theologians, in that they applied their reasoning to divine things by their deep scrutiny of invisible things. They surrendered themselves to wisdom as if to be perfected through it. Indeed, on this account, the ancients thought themselves to be perfected. But they were in fact about to lose the truth. Truth was not to be found by these paths. Instead, they began to sink down into the false nature of images. They claimed that visible appearances were the likeness of divine things, so that by means of these visible appearances they saw what seemed to them to be invisible things. Indeed, the visible appearance was significant, but that which was sought in this way concerning divine manifestation turns out to be not light poured out upon the eyes, but rather the spreading out of a dark mist. Certainly, nature shows forth its creator, but nature offers only a remote resemblance to the creator's excellence and majestic power. Philosophy has been unable to find an evident demonstration of the creator's excellence and majestic power in all these outwardly visible appearances. This is because nature, through which many things become clear in contemplation, was not in itself completely healthy. Indeed, nature itself does not contain the models formed through grace for the health of our internal vision. Worldly philosophy does not know the ark of wisdom, or the foundation of all things of the flesh of the eternal word and the humanity of Jesus. This philosophy therefore contemplated only in the cloudy light of half-blind insight, using the created world as a model. This form of contemplation leads only to the observation of the outward appearance of creaturely things. On that basis, the ancient philosophers wandered and passed away from the truth, when in fact they had hoped that with their mind they would pass beyond the outward appearance of things to truth. Hi, Bink. They wished to pass beyond what they had learned by investigation alone, yet beyond those things that they were not able to see. Thus, those who thought themselves able to see were, in the end, found to be blind. Their procedures were images of errors that their theology, as indeed they called their study, by which they believed themselves to be thoroughly investigating divine things, venerated emptiness and deception. Hello, Bink. Through this, they went far beyond truth, beyond what is correct, and beyond the true nature of the good. They were deceived and ought now to blush. To be sure, there is a kind of justice in the fact that, As to the highest things by which pride made their understanding firm, they also despised the humility of faith in the death of a Savior, that they marveled in recognition of the nobility of the Savior's creation. Two images were proposed to humanity by which it was possible to see invisible things. One is the image of nature, and one is the image of grace. The image of nature was the outward appearance of the things of the world. The image of grace is the humanity of the Word. By both means God is shown, but God was not understood in both ways. Nature certainly demonstrates its art by means of its outward appearance, but it is not able to illuminate completely the eye of contemplation. Truly, then, the humanity of the Savior was the healing through whom the blind received light and teaching, so that seeing they might know truth. The Savior made mud from spittle and smeared the eyes of the blind man, and the blind man washed his eyes and saw. And what happened after? The blind man seeing but not yet understanding, Jesus said, I am the one who spoke to you. The same one is the Son of God. Therefore, first Jesus illuminated, then he clearly demonstrated. Nature is able to demonstrate, but it is not able to illuminate completely. The world preaches its creator on the basis of nature's outward appearance. But again, this understanding of truth is not poured into the hearts of humanity. But while the creator is signified through the many images of nature, in the images of grace, God is revealed to be present. The images of nature were created so that God might be understood to be, while the images of grace were created so that God might be known to be present. This is the distance of this theology of the world from that which is called divine theology. It is impossible to demonstrate the invisible world unless it is demonstrated by visible things. On that account, all theology must necessarily contain visible demonstrations for the open expression of invisible realities. But worldly theology, we might say, adapted the work of creation and the elements of this world according to the created outward appearance of things. It hoped in this way to make its demonstration by means of these visible realities alone. Divine theology, on the other hand, has chosen the work of restoration according to the humanity of Jesus and his sacraments, which were from the beginning of the world adding natural symbols in due measure as they conform to his teaching. However, as we have said, a greater declaration of divinity is revealed in the sacraments of grace, in the flesh of the Word, and by mystical operation than is ever preached by the outward appearance of natural things. For this reason, mundane theology, using a demonstration that in the end clarified little, did not have the power to bring forth incomprehensible truth unstained by error. Divine theology, however, understood the need to preach humility by simple and pure assertions. Now, the nature of divine theology ought to be clarified, and the clearest depths and the beginning of things ought to be discussed. All philosophy is divided into three principal parts: logic, ethics, and theory. A fourth, to which we will direct our minds at the proper time, is to recount divine theology from the standpoint of its overflowing abundance. So philosophy contains three parts. The first is logic, through which, by the power and harmony of reasoning, attention is given to the discernment of true things from false. The second is ethics, by which a way of correct living is ordered, and a form of discipline established according to which virtue is maintained. The third is theory, by which only the truth in all things, that is, what truly is and what truly is not, is selected for careful observation. These are three parts to this theoretical aspect of philosophy. First is mathematics, second physics, third theology, in which by contemplation of truth, one ascends to the summit by means of degrees of contemplation. In the first, mathematics, the visible forms of visible objects are contemplated. However, in the second, physics, Invisible things are observed through visible causes. Only the third, theology, contemplates invisible substances and the invisible natures of invisible substances. And there is in these invisible things a kind of progression and a certain perfection of mind, rising to a knowledge of truth. Indeed, by the visible forms of visible things, one arrives at the invisible causes of visible things. And through the invisible causes of visible things, one ascends to invisible substances and a knowledge of their natures. This latter, however, is the summit of mundane philosophy and the perfection of its truth. No higher truth is possible to the contemplative soul alone. In this way, the wise ones of this world were made foolish, proceeding, as we have already said, by the pattern of nature alone, according to the elements and the outward appearance of things of the world. These wise yet foolish ones did not have the exemplars of grace, through which the outward appearance of things was humility, and through which the demonstration of truth was presented more clearly. Such is the manner in which God has rendered the wisdom of this world foolish. The world on its own is not able to recognize truth, since its mundane knowledge has contemptuously rejected the form of humility. We are now in a position to speak more fully regarding theology based on the hierarchy of Dionysius, about which we now, by the grace of explanation, undertake to say a few words. Indeed, all things are placed under the hierarchy of theology, and so it is necessary to place before the readers something introducing the theology of hierarchy. We ought also to define its material, which consists totally of invisible substances, and similarly using visible patterns to demonstrate something of the nature of invisible things. And so, with all of that in mind, you can now proceed to read a couple of books that I've written. The Christ of the Redemption, The Lord of the Redemption, which explain and expand upon the celestial hierarchy of Dionysius, the Areopagite. Angelology, which expands upon that as well. But also, you're going to be able to better understand the article, the chapter that is being released in early May in the book A Greater Reality. The chapter is called Out of Body Travel, Astral Travel, and Remote Viewing, where it will also discuss the hierarchies of the extraterrestrials and the angelic. And it will go into a lot of depth on the angelic hierarchy of Dionysius. All these things will be more greatly expounded in all those books. And this helps you to understand better now and be prepared to take that next step. So thank you for taking that progression with me. Now you're ready for all those books too.